I'm the storyteller, and my stories must be told. I have many stories, tales for both the young and old. I have many voices to describe many places. Many names have I, and many faces. In Russia I am Ivan, in Sweden I am Jan. In Germany I'm Johann, in America I'm John. From my many travels I have gathered these tales to teach you good sense when all else fails. Sometimes there are tears, sometimes there is laughter, but always are happily ever after.
Long ago and far away in a distant land, there stood, surrounded by great forests, the summer palace of the Tsar. Here the Tsar brought his wife, 3 daughters and retinue to spend the summer months away from the city. The summer palace was always well guarded by soldiers. One of these soldiers was Sergei. He had served the Tsar faithfully for many, many years, but as time went by, Sergei grew tired and sick. One day, as he was on duty, who should appear but an officer? "You look a disgrace!" shouted the officer. "Look at yourself!" And without more ado, he dismissed Sergei from the army. So, after all those faithful years of service to the Tsar and his country, Sergei was left with nothing, not even a ruble for a ride home to his village in the cold, snowy north. So Sergei just had to walk home. He walked and walked through the wild and lonely countryside. He was very upset he had been so badly treated. Hadn't he given the best years of his life to his country? And now he was left with nothing. As he walked, he remembered the wars in which he had fought, how he had been wounded. He still had the scars on his arms and chest to show for it. He remembered, too, his young sweetheart he had left behind in his village so many years ago, and whom he had never seen again. And though he was returning to his village after all this time, he did not know if his family would still be there, for he had heard tell from some travelers that sickness had swept that part of the land and many people had died. As he struggled on through the woods, he grew more and more tired and hungry. Perhaps, if he was lucky, he might come upon a village and be able to beg some food in return for work. Otherwise, he would never have the strength to walk the many miles to his home. He walked along the high ridge, but no sign of a house or hovel could he see. He was just about to collapse from tiredness when he caught sight of a still blue lake in the valley below. The water looked so cool and inviting that Sergei decided to stop and bathe his hot and aching feet. Wearily, he stumbled down the steep slope and came to rest under a shady tree. Sergei sighed sadly. "Oh, what shall I do?" he thought. have no money, no food, and I'm still many miles from my village. I will never get there. Really, I'd have nothing to lose if I hired myself to the devil." No sooner had he thought this than an ugly little man appeared. He sat, grinning at Sergei from a branch of a tree. "Who are you?" cried Sergei.
"You called me," replied the little man. "Weren't you just thinking of hiring yourself to the devil? We pay very well, you know."
Sergei backed away. Had he heard right? Was this a devil talking to him?
"Well, how about it?"
Grinned the little devil. I wonder what I'd have to do, thought Sergei despite himself. "They pay well," he said.
"Oh, you wouldn't have to do anything,"
laughed the devil, reading Sergei's thoughts.
"You just have to agree not to brush your hair, wash or even shave. Oh, and never change your clothes, trim your nails or even blow your nose for 15 years. And in return, you may have anything you desire. It's easy."
"It's tempting," said Sergei, "but it's hard to learn to be dirty. Still, I accept your offer, but you better play fair." The little devil grinned.
"Don't worry. We'll keep our side of the bargain if you keep yours."
So they shook hands to seal the bargain.
"But if you don't keep the bargain," warned the little devil, "then the devil will take your soul for eternity."
Oh, it's too late now, thought Sergei. So he said, "If I can have anything I want, I'd like a bag of rubles and a fine house in Moscow to start with." That was no problem for the little devil. He just waved his arm, and there at Sergei's feet there appeared a bag of rubles. Sergei picked it up. He had never seen so much money in his whole life. Was he dreaming? Had he really made a pact with the devil? He must have done, for there he was grinning at him, and the rubles certainly looked real. And so did this Moscow street. Yes, the devil had kept his promise, and here was Sergei in the middle of Moscow, just as he had asked. He looked around, but the little devil had gone. Then he heard a voice hiss,
"You'll find a key in the bag. It will open the door to that fine house over there. That and everything else you ask for shall be yours. But remember our bargain."
So Sergei took his bag of rubles, and with the key he let himself into the fine house the devil had given him. And from that day on, he kept his vow, and never washed, shaved, or changed his clothes. As time went by, Sergei grew more and more filthy. He no longer recognized himself as the smartly dressed soldier from the Tsar's army, for his hair was now all matted and snarled, and so was his beard, and his face was caked with dirt. He really did look a dreadful sight. But with the devil's help, he had grown richer than his wildest dreams. His whole house was filled with baskets of gold. At first he took great delight in the money, but after a while he found he could do little with it. He never went out, because he looked so awful and smelt so dreadful. He had no friends, so he just spent all day at home alone with his money. Finally, one day, as he was gazing at all his riches, he thought, "This money is doing no good sitting here. I shall give some away to the poor. Perhaps it will help save my soul from damnation." So Sergei took a great basket of gold and carried it out of the house. Remembering how poor he had been, Sergei was very happy to help other needy people. And the news soon traveled that the unwashed old soldier who lived like a king was handing out gold coins every day outside his house. People came from miles around to queue for Sergei's gold. And so, for 14 years, Sergei lived like this. He kept his bargain with the devil and never washed, and in return he received everything he asked for. The little devil wasn't very happy about Sergei giving his gold away, but there was nothing he could do about it. Now it so happened that on the 15th year of Sergei's pact with the devil, the Tsar called for his treasurer to ask him for some money. The treasurer was very nervous, for he had to tell the Tsar that all his coffers were empty. The Tsar was greatly shocked. Was it possible that the most powerful of all men was penniless? What could he do? For he had not paid his army, and the soldiers were getting restive. So when the treasurer showed him that there was not 1 ruble left in the palace, the Tsar knew he had to do something fast.
What about that old soldier who gives his money away?
Muttered the Tsar. Go to him at once and ask him to come to the palace. The treasurer thought it was a capital idea, for he too had heard of the soldier's great generosity. So the treasurer made his way to Sergei's house, carrying with him a formal invitation to visit the Tsar at his summer palace. Sergei received the treasurer politely and took the letter. He was very curious to know what the Tsar could want with him. The treasurer's eyes nearly popped out of his head when he saw the vast hoard of gold that Sergei possessed. Never, in all his years in the Tsar's service, had he seen so much money. This smelly old soldier was a millionaire. Sergei could not restrain a chuckle when he read the invitation. He was cordially invited to attend. That was funny. For how many years had he marched up and down in front of the palace? But this was the first time he'd ever been invited in. Sergei was curious to know why the Tsar wanted to see him. Yes, he would go. But since he wasn't allowed to wash, the Tsar would just have to receive him as he was. The treasurer was beginning to feel a trifle ill, for the smell was quite overpowering. The Tsar was waiting impatiently for the old soldier's arrival, when in came the treasurer, very pleased with himself for having brought Sergei to the palace so quickly. Sergei walked slowly up to the Tsar and made a low bow. The Tsar rose to greet Sergei, but quickly backed away, for the smell was horrible. But remembering the money, he smiled and said, "Good soldier, I've heard so much of your charity. Alas, my coffers are empty and I cannot pay my army. Will you give me some gold? I will make you a general in return." "Thank you, your majesty," said Sergei, smiling, "but I have no wish to be a general. In reward for my gold, I would like to marry one of your daughters." The Tsar was shocked. One of his daughters to marry this disgusting fellow? But he needed the gold badly, so he said, "All right, but please have your portrait painted so I can show it to my daughters. If you like, I will ask the court artist to paint you. He's very short-sighted and has a good imagination." But Sergei did not want the court artist to paint him. Instead, Sergei had his portrait painted, showing him in his filthy state. The Tsar sighed when he saw the portrait, but he took it to his daughter's chamber. First, he showed it to his eldest daughter and asked, "Would you consider marrying this man, my dear?" But the princess would not dream of such a thing. "I'd prefer to marry the devil," she replied very coldly. Really, what was her father thinking of? At that moment, the little devil appeared behind her. With a wicked smile, he jotted down her name in his black book and then disappeared. The Tsar was disappointed, for he did so need the old soldier's gold. So he turned to his second daughter. "Would you marry him, my dear, for my sake?" "No," she replied. "I too would marry the devil first." And who should pop up at these words but the little devil? Again he jotted down the princess's name in his book, and then away he went. The Tsar was now getting very worried. He had one last chance. His youngest daughter. Perhaps she would agree. "I have a request, daughter," he said. "What is it, father?" she asked sweetly. "Would you please marry this man? It is very important," cried the Tsar. The princess looked at the portrait and sighed. Then she said, "Very well, father, if it is your wish. May God protect me." The Tsar was delighted. Now he would be able to have all the gold he needed. He did feel very sorry for his daughter, but what could he do? The princess just sighed a little sadly to herself and then went back to reading her book. So the treasurer was sent to the old soldier's house to tell him of the good news that the youngest daughter of the Tsar had consented to marry him, and would Sergei please honor the agreement by giving the Tsar the gold. When the treasurer entered Sergei's house and told him the good news, Sergei began to laugh. Really, it was very funny. He, who had once been the poorest soldier in the Tsar's army, was now going to save the Tsar from bankruptcy and marry his daughter. Yes, it was very funny, thought Sergei, as he lay there chuckling. The treasurer waited nervously, for he feared that the soldier had quite lost his reason. The news soon spread abroad that the old soldier was going to marry a princess, and people came to watch the Tsar's officers carrying away the many baskets of gold. The Tsar was waiting eagerly for the gold to arrive. He had given orders for the first baskets to be brought to him. And when the gold was brought in, the Tsar was truly delighted. Now, at last, he could pay his bills. He would give the army a bonus for being so patient, he decided. The day before the wedding, Sergei was looking at himself in the mirror and thinking how ugly he looked when the little devil appeared. "Oh, I am so pleased to see you," cried Sergei, "for our pact is up today. Please release me, for I am so tired of being dirty. I want to be presentable again." The little devil did not want to release Sergei, and he tried to tempt him to go on serving the devil. "No, I value my soul more than your gold," cried Sergei, as he bundled the devil out of the door. Now, the Prince of Devils was waiting by the lake for the little devil to arrive with Sir Gay's soul. So when he appeared alone and said, "He kept his bargain. I cannot take his soul," the prince was so angry with the little devil for not having tricked Sir Gay into losing and for wasting all his precious gold that he was just going to order that he should be drowned, when the little devil, thinking quickly, raised his arms. And who should appear but the two princesses?
Look, Grandfather, he cried. We may have lost one soul, but I have captured two more. Both of them said they'd rather marry the devil than the old soldier.
The prince was so delighted with the two juicy young souls that he forgave the little devil altogether. Poor Sir Gay, meanwhile, was beginning to fear that he would have to go to the wedding in his filthy state, when the little devil appeared.
Since you cannot be tempted to serve the devil any more, I will release you,
said the little devil. And he raised his cloak, and the old Sir Gay disappeared, and in his place stood a handsome young man. So the wedding took place. Sir Gay looked so handsome that the princess was very surprised and delighted. So was the Tsar, for although he quite liked the old Sir Gay, he didn't think he could have lived with that terrible smell forever. So with all the gold Sir Gay had given the Tsar, there were no more worries about not paying the army or anyone else. And the royal family lived on together very happily